Hi, everybody. I hope this video for me finds you all well and in good spirits. And having already watched my first film suggestion, the Red Sea Diving Resort. I did get a couple of people who posted their answers to the questions that I posed. And in perfect Beth Tikva fashion, of course, there was no consensus. Some of you really liked the film, and some of you enjoyed the film but thought it could have been a lot more, that there were some opportunities missed. I myself I enjoyed the film. I thought it was well done. But I agree to a certain extent that the director had to make a decision about what he was going to highlight and what was going to fall a little bit more by the wayside. And I guess in perfect Hollywood fashion, he really focused on the Mossad character, who really, I agree with one of our members who said he had a huge ego in perfect Mossad style, if you will. And it didn't really go into depth too much about the role played by the Ethiopian hero of the story. Um, I did a ton of research about this film, and I thought I would share with you what I found, courtesy of time. So in a second, I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to go through some of this document with you because I think it really gave a very decent review, and it gives us a lot of history and background into into the true story events, which of course this film depicts. In addition, I did a bunch of additional research for you, and there's going to be some source sheets posted on the BT website. One which gives you a whole list of articles that you can look up online about the events of July 2019. And it actually leads you right into current events amidst this current COVID plague that we're enduring. Just before Israel closed their borders, there was another group of Ethiopian immigrants who made Aliyah to Israel, literally at the 9th hour before the borders were closed. In addition, I'm going to spend a bit of time in another source sheet talking to you about Miamakim, one of the songs actually that rolls in the credits at the end of the film, which was put together by the Idan Racheli project. For those of you who were aware, he did a live web concert with over 400,000 people from around the world enjoying his music. I'm going to give you some information about the Idan Racheli project, him, and the artists that he works with, and the inception behind him putting together this project. He is one of the most well-known Israeli musicians, known both in Israel and also abroad. And so I put together a fact sheet about him, and also gave you the translation and the Hebrew to this song, Mia Makim. So all that is going to be posted on the website. Okay, so without further ado, I'm going to try to share my screen with you, and hopefully we can look at this document together. I hope this works. Okay, fantastic. Love it when technology works. It's great. Okay, so this is from time.com, and I'm just going to highlight and read a couple of important facts out of this article about this film. So it is based on a true story, namely the Operation Brothers mission, which ran in Israel from 1979 to 1984, where thousands of Ethiopian Jewish lives were saved. As the film depicts, this abandoned hotel did actually serve as the fantastic cover for this risky operation. The Mossad agents did occupy this hotel, ran the hotel, had actual tourists coming who were encouraged by tourist magazines that were circulated throughout Europe. Now, the question that the second question that I raised in the discussion forum was, why did the director decide to release the film when he did? I think it was done very purposefully and very timely. As most of you, I think, know, in June of 2019, large-scale protests flared up in Israel after the shooting of 18-year-old Solomon Teka. He was the 11th Ethiopian Israeli that had been killed by police within the 20-year period. It ignited a huge protest that lasted for quite a long time in Israel, and unfortunately escalated into violent demonstration. But more importantly, I think it highlighted an issue, a real issue in Israel, and it's not just an Israeli issue. Sadly, it's, I think, a global issue, that of racism and discrimination. You know, the film is a real feel-good film. It leaves you on a high. You know, that first of all, that the Israeli government made the decision not to stand idly by, turn a blind eye, and forget about Beta Israel, the Ethiopian community. Instead, repatriated them as Israeli citizens. But it also leaves us with the question of, and then what happens? Because the journey in the film really ends with this feel-good moment of them all coming to Israel. But we know in reality that that really was just the beginning of another journey. Okay, so a little bit of history for those of you who aren't up on that period of time. I personally had to refresh my memory, so don't feel at all concerned if you weren't aware of this period in history. It is a long and complex history of how the Ethiopian Jewish community came to be. And I'm not going to actually spend a lot of time speaking about that, and rather focus on this era of the 70s and the 80s. So I'm just going to read from this article because they say it way better than I could. In the 1970s and 80s, a combination of push factors in Ethiopia led to a big exodus of refugees from the Beta Israel community, which is depicted in the Red Sea diving resort. The Ethiopian Revolution in 1974 heightened underlying political tensions in the country, with opponents of the military regime facing the threat of arrest or execution. There were also economic and environmental factors, including droughts in 73 and 74, and again in the early 80s, which led to widespread famine and one of the worst humanitarian crises of the 20th century. Amid this descent into civil war beginning in 1974, Ethiopian Jews became more prominent as political revolutionaries. They were active in rebel struggles against the military regimes, and of course, this made them targets. Infighting between the differing rebel groups, combined with the instability in the country, led to more and more Beta Israel refugees fleeing Ethiopia via Sudan at the beginning of 78. And we saw this, we saw one of these such perilous journeys that they had to make from Ethiopia into Sudan on foot. The journey through the Horn of Africa was extremely dangerous. But because of the perilous situation that they were facing within Ethiopia, a lot of people judged that a risk worth taking. One estimate suggests that around 4,000 of the 20,000 Beta Israel people who made the journey from northern Ethiopia to Sudan actually died en route. Now, the question is, why did Israeli agents get involved in this rescue operation? I think I would be remiss if I didn't take a second to speak about how, as my mother would say, tipusi Israeli this mission was, how typical Israeli this kind of mission was. It only with Israeli chutzpah, ingenuity, and quickness of thinking would a group of Israelis come up with a plan so absolutely ridiculous that it was actually genius and successful. The fact that they, through dramatic flair, these Mossad agents from around the world get recruited and actually, scout locations, find this location, run this resort with actual tourists serving as perfect cover, all the while bringing thousands of Ethiopian Jews to safety is really very Israeli, and I found really, really enjoyable to watch in this particular film. Um, it is estimated that through Operation Brother, Operation Moses, and Operation Solomon, taking us into the early 90s, that an estimated 90,000 members of the community from Ethiopia found themselves able to make Aliyah to Israel. Um, I really enjoyed the film. I love a feel-good story, but I do think that some of the things that the director included were very purposeful and led me down a path a path in my research. So first of all, as I said, I think that the feel-good ending really, in reality, is just the beginning um, of, of the journey. Um, I think that there was a lot that could have been done better in Israel, but by the same token, I think there was a lot that was done really well given the magnitude of the task at hand. Um, you know, the film being released at a time where issues of racism and discrimination against the Ethiopian community were so front of page in the news, um, was purposeful, I think, by the director. And hang on, I'm just trying to see if I can come back to you. Ah, there we go. Was purposeful, and I think this feel-good movie only skims the surface of the real issue. There is still, sadly, some serious discrimination going on against the Ethiopian community in Israel. And of course, racial discrimination and inequity that goes on here and in many places around the world. So we could choose to sort of take that depressing reality and stay there. But I think that the director, at the end of the film, he left us with a message of hope, not only in using Idan Racheli's song, which I'm going to get to in a second, but also in the fact that at the end of the film, he reminds us to remember that there are still hundreds of thousands of refugees seeking safe haven in the world, and that as a Jewish people, this is a motif and a reality that we are extremely familiar with in our history, and we should remain to have that as a top of mind issue as we lead our lives. So that was one piece that I found really interesting. Secondly, in the film, when the Ethiopian narrator is remarking that, you know, even though the Red Sea diving resort did have to shut down and that Operation Brother did finish before they could get the entire Ethiopian community out, he does talk about the fact that they did go back. He also referenced a line, "He who saves a life entire." One of the more famous lines from our Talmud comes from Masechet Sanhedrin. That section of the Talmud actually is talking about judges and judging capital crimes in particular, and it speaks about if you destroy a life, you're destroying a whole lineage, but if you save a life, it's as if you saved not just that life, but a whole world. I think the director included this line also very purposefully. I know there's been a bit of debate in terms of, you know, he who saves an Israeli life, a Jewish life, or he who saves everyone's life. But I think in this instance, the director probably would have appreciated a more global approach, that really we have to do what we can, whether it's through charity, whether it's through social responsibility, which is very top of mind for all of us as we've sequestered ourselves, socially distancing ourselves in order to try to, you know, flatten the curve, as I think the vernacular is. We all have a responsibility, to do what we can, and not just think about ourselves, but to think about what we can do to make things better for those that we share the planet with. So a really important message that came out of that. Now, about Idan Racheli and his song. Idan Racheli he created the Idan Racheli project. He himself is an incredible musician, but he created this collaborative group of musicians, a lot of Ethiopian musicians, along with others from all kinds of, with all kinds of music and all kinds of origins. And it was a really, really incredible message of hope that I think the director was also trying to leave us with. Even when you look at the Ethiopian situation, and you'll see in the fact sheet, things 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 were definitely difficult when this whole journey of bringing Ethiopian immigrants into Israel began. But despite the fact that we still have a long way to go, when we look at how the original generations of the 70s and 80s and 90s that were in those first waves of Aliyah fared, and then you compare to what's going on with the younger generations, there's definitely been improvement. Having said that, we still have a long way to go, but what I find really a message of hope here is that the younger generations are not taking the status quo as a fait accompli. They are advocating. They are trying to bring the issue to front of mind, albeit sometimes these things can de-escalate into violence. Violence sometimes begets violence. But on the other hand, there's some incredible, amazing advocacy groups that are making real change in more mainstream governmental ways, legislative ways. And so, you know, I don't want anybody to misconstrue my comments as holding Israel up to any bigger of a microscope than I would hold us here in Canada to, or any free country around the world. But what Israel has that some other countries lack is at least a willingness to see itself for what it is, to not run away from criticism, to try to govern in a way that brings about positive change. It's a process. A lot of good has been done. A lot of good still has yet to be done, but there's always hope, especially in our younger people and our younger generations whose parents hoped that their life would be better than their life was, and who don't settle for words like no, or we can't, or that's just the way it is. So I hope you take a look at the source sheets that I've posted online along with this video. I hope you did at least enjoy viewing the film, and stay tuned for my next film suggestion, which is going to be posted on the website on Tuesday, March 31st. Another serious film. By all means, if you guys have film suggestions that you would like to watch together as a group and talk about together as a group, please either post on our brand new Facebook group, which I'm hoping is going to be easier for you guys to access, or you can also email me. I'm still here on the other end of the computer. Sigal, S-I-G-A-L, at bethtikvah.toronto.org, B-E-T-H-T-I-K-V-A-H, Toronto.org, longest email in the history. Or just click on Program Director on our website and that'll come to me as well. I wish you continued good health, and I wish you positive vibes and a positive attitude, and of course, happy streaming.